Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Film Voyage. Today, we have with us a filmmaker, a screenwriter who kind of revolutionized the entire feminist narrative in mainstream Hindi cinema, at least. Uh, Alankrita Srivastava, thank you so much for joining, ma'am. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and having this conversation with you. So, thank you so much for inviting me.
So, let's just get right into it. Talking about, like, of course, we were talking about that you were like school in Dehradun, and when did your like so to say film voyage start? When did your uh, filmmaking journey start?
So strange you were talking about school, but I think for me, I started getting interested in the medium of cinema in school, not necessarily with cinema per se, but basically I went to this all girls boarding school called Wellham Girls, and we used to have this activity class called audio visual, which was just for the senior students. So when I was in junior school, I remember that, on Founders Day, which is the annual function, when all parents and guests and all have come, it would be like this darkened space, and there was a big screen in the open air. And the audiovisual film, which is just made with stills and music, with stills and sound, that was sort of screened. And, it was this big screen, and it was so dark, and it was so beautiful. And I remember that I just got goosebumps, and I was like, I mean, that time I wouldn't think beyond the fact that, okay, I definitely want to do this activity when I'm in senior school. But I think that's when I felt and I'd always read a lot, but I started feeling like the power of storytelling through a combination of visual and sound. And so then when I was in senior school, I did do that audio visual class. And then I went on to study journalism in college at Lady Shri Ram College. And then I did my master's in mass communication from Jamia. And then I moved to Bombay and I started assisting. And so, but I guess that for me, like the fascination with the medium, I guess started when I was in school, and I was overall very interested in like stories because I had to read a lot and I had to live a lot inside my own head. So I think it was like the logical thing.
Yeah. So when you started assisting Mr. Jha on films like Ganga Jal, and which were very even back then he was making the kind of films that today we see on the web, and of course he was making it much more mainstream, much more accessible, but he was as hard hitting back then. So what was assisting him like? What was that journey like for you?
I must say I'm very, very fortunate that I spent so many years working with him. And I think I'm very glad that I didn't start off working in films that were very obviously mainstream, because I think that, first of all, like the moment I finished from Jamia, I started working with him. I was assisting on Ganga Jal, the original, the first Ganga Jal. And I think it was a very interesting work atmosphere and ethos as well. Like everyone was working very hard. It was all about just, making the scenes happen and all of that. So I think, first of all, I feel like my approach to cinema, has been shaped by him in many ways. First of all, that your cinema should be saying something. Otherwise, it's not really worthwhile making the film. And I think that resonated with me a lot in terms of the kind of person I am, that it needs to mean something to me. And I think so from him, I really learned also about the conviction of your thoughts. Like, make films that you believe in. Um, it's not about the glamour quotient of it or anything. It's really about telling the stories that mean something to you. And of course, I also really learned the value of hard work, because I think his sets were always a place where it was always about work first. It wasn't a filmy space in that sense, what we consider like. It was very much about like the work and all that. So I think I like learned a lot. I really feel working with Mr. Jha was like my proper film school, actually, because I just got to learn a lot, and there was a lot of responsibility. And I think I learned the most important thing I think I learned was about having the courage of conviction, more than just technical things, and of course about taking responsibility. So I think it was very interesting, and I'm very fortunate. I feel that my schooling, in that sense, my early years was spent working in that kind of cinema. So I think my view of cinema, I guess, in many ways has been shaped by that. And he's been really encouraging. He produced my first two features, Turning 30 and Lipstick. And he really, and it was very difficult because of lack of distribution and things like that, the kind of films I wanted to make, and and the kind of market there was always such a dissonance. But I think he really encouraged me to just believe in the stories I wanted to tell, and not worry about whether the market is ready for it or not, or you have the audience or not. He always encouraged me to figure out what it is that I want to say and just stick to that. So I think I'm really, really grateful to him for that. And of course, he's really been a fabulous mentor to me in that sense. So I think I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah. You said that, you said the first Gangajal, the real Gangajal, you almost said that. So, what did you think of Jai Gangajal? Like, if I may ask.
It was a different film actually. It wasn't I mean, I'm saying that because that was like my first, and also like it was my first film experience. So it was really fun, and it was also very interesting. Like that crew, I remember there were a crew of almost 250 people, and there were only three women on that crew. There was me, the hairdresser, and the makeup. No, I think me, the hairdresser, and a costume assistant. So it was a very interesting atmosphere, and we shot non-stop. We were shooting in Vai, and it was like a very big community feeling. And we had some really brilliant actors from NSD, and it was very intense. So we had just come straight from film school, and then of course, so you've done made films in Jamia in college, but to be on a real film set. So suddenly I'm seeing like this big crane and this big crowd. So it was really very interesting. I grew a lot through that film because I joined as like an intern. And by the last schedule of the film, I was, the first had to leave town. I was actually running the set by the end of it. So I think there was a lot of growth and a lot of learning. And I have really beautiful memories of that film.
Yes, I got my answer. Okay, but when you started out, like, of course, coming from that space where you're making films for a course, like, I also went to Whistling Woods and I made films, and but when we go on a real film set and we kind of managing the set and everything, it's a very different ball game. So, like, one of the most terrifying things spaces to be in is a set where of course, there's like you can't escape that fact, that there is a gender politics going on there. There has to be. So there you are with, like, and you're managing crowds and everything in a crew that is predominantly male. I mean, it's a very cliched question, but what was your typical day as an AD on a set like that?
So, it's a really good question, actually. But I must say that, when I started working in films, there were not so many women who were actually working on film crews. So I didn't think too much about the fact that there were such few women on the set. I mean, all this I'm telling you in retrospect, so many, like a decade and a half later. It wasn't something that, to be very honest, struck me then, and it wasn't a question I was preoccupied with at all, because there was so much, like I just had to do my work and there was so much work to be done. And it was like a race against like time to get everything organized so that and I was in charge of so many things on my first film. But I can say that then I was first I was the chief assistant director on Abharan, and I was then the associate director on Rajniti. And I do feel that in retrospect, I can say that I took on a very fierce personality, of being very harsh in the way I managed things, in the way I spoke. I also worked really hard. Like I worked harder than anybody else in terms of making sure, I would reach the set before even production would reach very often. Um, to always stay on top of my job so that no one can ever say that, oh, like she's not managing the situation well. I used to scream a lot in terms of like just speaking very loudly. In fact, even developed like pharyngitis and laryngitis and all, because like you feel the need to assert yourself. And now I feel like I didn't understand all that, and then I was just like in this crazy thing of, I'm like, I just have to make everything happen and make sure that the shooting goes off really smoothly, and all of that. But in retrospect, of course, I feel like there is this sense of knowing that you're really one of the few women on a very all male kind of crew, and you need to get like all the teams to take you seriously. And I feel like a lot of my way of speaking and my manner of being very like, I would never relax on set. I was never like, I think it came from I wanted everyone to take me very seriously. And then later, like when I started directing, I realized I'm very chilled out when I'm on a set. And I realized that it's because, uh, like I didn't feel then so much. I mean, then also there were different issues I had to deal with, but I didn't feel that need of like I need everyone to take me seriously. I was the director; they had to take me seriously. I mean, there were still issues, but it wasn't. I didn't feel that need to don that very that armor of that fierce personality. I was executive producer on a film called Dil Dosti, etc. Even there, I had this very, because I had to manage the whole thing. So I feel like, we bring out different. I'm not saying that that thing didn't exist inside me, but I'm saying you bring out different aspects of your personality, knowingly or unknowingly. But now I feel I would never do that. I don't need to do that. Um, so yeah, but and also I think like you never want to slip up, which I think is not a bad thing. I mean, I feel it's good to have that feeling. So as an AD and as an EP, I was very like, very clear that there was no like question of a slip up. I used to hardly sleep when I was shooting, actually. I was so like, all the time trying to make sure everything is going fine, especially a film like Rajniti, because it was so vast and so many crowds, so many actors, and we actually finished that film ahead of schedule. So yeah.
Wow. So, like coming from that space where you're kind of trying to make your own place in things. When was that point? What was that point in time where you decided that okay, now I need to make my first film? And because that that leap to take, okay, now I'm ready to direct. That's a very, like, for some people, it takes quite quite a few years to realize what exactly is it that they want to make. So I'm speaking strictly in terms of the creative aspect of it, that the Turning 30 was your first film. So where did that come from?
I was trying to write some other scripts before I wrote Turning 30, and but they would never get completed while I was aiding. I would write something, a few pages, I would have some kind of an idea, but it would never be something that ever finished. Like it was, and then I was executive producer on this film called Khoya Khoya Chand. And I remember that it was the day of the film's release, and I was driving to some godforsaken place to get the DVD mastering done, because we knew that after some time the DVD has to release. And it has just been a very intense like thing. I had just done Apharan, and then straight after that Dil Dosti, etc., and Khoya Khoya Chand. And I remember I was driving back. I was driving for that DVD mastering, and I don't know. I just knew in that moment that I'm just ready and I have to do it. And just then, Mr. Jha called me, and I just told him, I was like, I'm kind of done with all this. I really have to work on my own film. And he's like, I was thinking exactly the same thing. You must do that. And so then I took some time off, and like I wrote Turning 30, and still and after that I still did work on Rajniti, and I shot Turning 30 in between two schedules of Rajniti, because I was still I was associate director on that and trying to make my film and all that. But that was a moment, I think it was very, very clear to me that I was ready. And also in terms of that story had been coming to me, about this girl. I had gotten this image of this girl who's it's raining, and her car breaks down, and nothing in her life is working out, either at work or with her boyfriend who she thinks she's going to marry. And that image kept coming back to me. And of course, I was not yet 30 at that time. I was 27 or something, 28. But it was something that was very like vivid in my imagination. And then I just felt like I have to make this film about this girl who was actually, so the other scripts I was writing were not characters who were very close to me in that sense. But somehow Turning 30 was it was so strange that the moment I started, I typed Turning 30 on my computer, I knew I would make the film and it would be my first film, because I felt a very strong impulse to make the film, and also I felt very like I kind of knew like the character and that place, and I felt like there was this force propelling me from inside to tell that story. So I think that's really how it happened. And then I wrote that script, and of course it went through many revisions, and I shot sometime, I mean, whatever, short a year and a half after I had that kind of thought. But it was very clear. And, then I started off on that process of trying to set up the film and get an actor and figure out how budgets, this and that. And then eventually, a year and a half after I had that thing, I actually could go ahead and shoot it. um, but yeah, I think it's instinctive, because I think I never felt it with any of the other scripts I was writing. They were very like alien. I was writing more because I felt like I have to. I wasn't like feeling that sense of connect. Like with this one, I knew the moment. It's literally like the moment I typed turning 30 on my computer, I just knew it. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to make this film. So yeah, and I think it helped that it was, as the first film, it was a character who did come from my milieu. And I mean, it was a very familiar space for me, to kind of explore world, everything. So I think that helped me a lot as well.
So coming from that space, like turning 30, as you said, is your like you're familiar with that milieu and everything. What like cinematically, when it came to like it's since it's your first film and you've written and you have this tendency of writing not very plot driven scripts but very character driven scripts. Um, okay, just a random question. How many drafts did turning 30 take to like reach its final
Hmm,
outcome?
I can't remember, but about 4 or 5 drafts at least.
Okay, what did Anjum sir say when you made him read the script?
Anjum sir, he was very encouraging. He acted also in the film.
Yeah, yeah, I know. That's
He has been a great support all my life, I must say. He is the one person, when I was an assistant, I was an assistant director, and every time, and then I was an EP after that. And I went to him with the Dil Dosti, etc. script to take feedback from him. Then I would keep going to him for something or the other. And he would keep coming to the office. And he was the one person actually who very early on made me sit down, and he's like, you have to look at writing your own work. Like you have to start writing. He gave me a list of books to read. He really, really helped me. Like he also, and then I told him that I keep writing, and I don't like what I write. And then he actually sat me down and told me that the thing is that, do you think you're a genius? And I was like, no. So he's like, why do you think that everything you write is going to be gold? The point is you have to write. You can't be like, it's not great, so I'm not going to write. So he really actually encouraged me. And then there was one time he told me that now I don't want to meet you until you come back with your own script and say, please give me feedback on my script. Or like, so I think he's been a very strong, and he continues to be, I must say.
So yeah, well, my question was not translating that cinematically. That kind of a like mostly when we're in film school or we study about making films, the form and how to treat spaces and what was your learning in terms of that and how did you approach your script like in the first when we're thinking of our first film we think of like long takes and everything that okay I'm gonna shoot dialogue scenes like like Coron and all those fantasies. But what was that like for you when you were getting to make your first film?
I didn't have any such thoughts because I had a budget constraint. And to be very honest, just 1 week before I was shooting, my budget was slashed by almost half because there was some major issue. And I really had to take a call whether I want to still make the film or not. And I decided that I'm going to go ahead and make it. So I had to change my DP. I had to even like I was earlier taking Kodak footage, and then I switched to Fuji because they decided to give me like a 50% discount, and I had to make a lot of last minute changes. So I was actually too stressed about making sure the film finishes in the budget. I was shooting on film, so I had to make sure that like I only have a certain number of cans in which to sort of finish the film. I had the entire film storyboarded. So I was in that sense a little quite clear about what shots I was going to take. I really couldn't shoot extra or whatever. I didn't really go over time. So it was a very like an economical way of doing things. I had some ideas, like I wanted it to have like a pop feel, like like brighter colors and things like that. I wanted it to have a handheld feel in certain spaces. So we used a camera which was lighter, so we could give keep that sort of breathe going in a lot, like breathe and movement, because I knew I couldn't afford steady cam everywhere and things like that. So I think at some choices like that, I was a bit particular about the production design to have like little texture and things. But I think beyond that, I don't think I thought so much. To be very honest, I was also shooting in the middle of um, two schedules of Rajniti. So I just had that much time to plan and prep and actually shoot and everything. Um, So I think I was more, driven by instinct, though I must say, like in terms of framing and all, I had planned roughly like what it was going to be like. But I don't think, I mean, I had some ideas about some scenes. I definitely wanted to shoot them in a particular way and all of that. But I don't think that more than that, I had, thought about anything. And I must say that I started thinking more about cinema, after I finished turning 30, after it came out. Till then, I had been so busy working that I didn't have so much time to dwell on a lot of things actually about storytelling and all of that. I feel like I just jumped in and, just like taking action more than thinking so much. He's had a really nice crew, a very young crew, and had lovely actors. And so, yeah, I really had fun shooting. And I'm very proud of the film. It was, it didn't do well at the box office, but I got so much love for the film that it was really, really very, overwhelming. So I think a lot of women across the country really reached out. And even now, like randomly, people always come up to me. They're like, Turning 30 is a film that we keep watching. It always makes us feel good when something terrible is happening in our lives. So I think the film, yeah. So I think the purpose of the film, the reason it was made was served. And yeah, it was a very, very fulfilling experience. And fortunately for me, my producer was really amazing, so I didn't feel very bad that it didn't do well at the box office, because I knew what a struggle it had been. Like, we didn't have any distribution. All the distributors were like, ye kya picture hai, what is this? And it was all in English also. They're like, it's in English, and what is this girl, and what is she thinking? And also, it was a struggle to release the film. So I think I was just grateful that we managed to release the film. And yeah, so that's
Yeah,
all.
that was the thing. Like when we read the first, like I remember it came out in 2011, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was in seventh standard. Then the review, I don't know why, for some reason, every review mentioned this, that this is predominantly an English film. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it has Purab Kohli. How can it be an English film? So, but what difficult was that to mount a film like that, which was, you're not casting stars and it's not your conventional, and it had a very American rom-comish feel, if I may say so. So, when it comes to mounting a film like that, which you perhaps now it's much more easier to market a film like that, but earlier it wasn't. So, what was that like? How did you pitch and how did you sell this idea to others, like in convincing your team or even a producer or say actors to come on board with a script like this?
I was just very lucky. This is the film I wanted to make. This is the film I wrote. This is the film I gave to my producer, Mr. Jha. He said, okay, do it. It's lovely. He said, you need to do another couple of drafts. Let's do it. So it was greenlit like that. I went to Gul. Gul loved it. She's like, I want to do it. Um, I went to Purab. First, he said no. He took 1 week, 10 days. Then I met him a couple of times, and then he's like, okay, whatever. So then he's like, he'll do it. So honestly, I didn't have any struggle, to be honest, in mounting the film. The problem was, of course, that the budget was very limited. And that budget thing got changed because there was a huge recession that was starting at that time. So many films are getting cancelled and all that. And then, but for me, luckily, I mean, at least Mr. Jha just said, just reduce the budget. Otherwise, we can't go ahead. Like, things are very bad financially in the market. But I think the real struggle came after the film was made. And then actually, no one, I knew, but I guess no one had realized it really, because it had Hindi as well. No one had realized it's such a predominantly English film until the distributors started coming and they're like, "Ye to English picture hai, ye kya bana diya," and all that stuff. So I think we had a hard time in like how will the film release and all that. And then of course it was really brave of Mr. Jha. He was like, "We'll just release it ourselves," because it was just going on, and it was not, we were not getting the kind of terms we wanted from distributors and things. So but we struggled because of that. Obviously, there was not enough money for marketing and promotions, and it was all a little chaotic in terms of the release. But yeah, but in terms of mounting it, I must say I was very fortunate. I didn't really have any issues in mounting the film.
Yeah. So now coming from turning 30 to your next film, which I feel is your best, but yeah, that's just me. So that film, when you were, it was not a familiar space. Like as you just mentioned, that turning 30 was the milieu that that you know inside out. And this is like like you're making a film set in Bhopal with textures, and so this is something that I've noticed in all of your films is that you kind of set up a world of your story, and this is strictly in terms of the technicality I'm speaking, like the production design and everything, it's there, and then you just follow characters. So once you're doing that, once you've created those worlds, this is something that I saw in Lipstick, I saw in Dolly Kitty, and and even in Turning 30, that that you mentioned, like you're particular about production design. Once you've set up that thing and then you're just following characters, there's a tendency with filmmakers that once they have created something very intricate and very detailed about their world, there is this tendency of kind of showing that detail, of focusing on that detail much more than the character. This happens. So but you kind of tend to follow those characters. What's your approach like when it comes to breaking down shots and uh, coming to a language of the film that you're kind of trying to construct? Please talk a little bit about that.
Uh, so one is, of course, that I think it a lot changed for me between turning 30 to Lipstick and then further on to Dolly Kitty. Because turning 30, like I said, I was shooting on film and I was really confined by the number of cans. So I really shot whatever, very close to whatever I had storyboarded. And there was not that much space for trying out because we didn't have we just didn't have the physical footage to do that. And I would cut the shot immediately. And many scenes, like there's one line which is literally, there are no options, it's just that or nothing. So it was a very different way of doing things. With Lipstick, because it was digital, it really has changed my life. I love digital simply because I didn't then have the pressure of cans. So I like to roll extra, like even after like the line is ended, to just stay with the character and things like that. So so I think like that really works for me, and I don't. And now I'm not into like deciding the ed. Like with Turning 30, the edit was pretty much what was on the storyboard, and that's the film. But with Lipstick onwards, I've really worked on constructing the film actually in the edit, because having enough footage and then taking a decision later as to what, I mean, a rough idea you have, but overall, like which scene, which line I'll exactly take in which shot, I don't know. I could take it in an extreme close, I could take it in the wide also. So I feel like that ease has been very good for somebody like me. I mean, it's a personality thing. I think for me, it works better. It gives me a little more space to play with characters and just let them breathe, which I really kind of like. So I think that thing in terms of technique has changed. I'm really not into. I have an idea about how, of course, how I want to shoot the scene, but I think like I don't want to pre-decide the edit. That's one thing, and yeah, I think I've really enjoyed shifting milieus from Turning 30 to Lipstick, because also I'm very familiar with Bhopal. I've spent a lot of time there because I was prepping for Rajniti. I was literally in and out of Bhopal for 2 years, and I was practically living in Bhopal half the time. So actually, I'm very familiar with Bhopal. Also, I've grown up in a lot of small towns because my father was in the IAS, and we had to keep shifting cities. So it's not like I'm not familiar with small towns. So, but it's just that the characters are removed from me in terms of their social, educational,
That's what I meant, like in terms
yeah,
of the class. Yeah.
exactly, background. But that I find interesting to, you know, because I feel the decisions you take are very different when you're secure financially and you have a particular social status, to vis-a-vis you when you don't actually, when you're not secure financially. And I feel like, especially with female characters, I feel the decisions that they make, etc., are really there is a big difference. Like for instance, in Dolly Kitty, there are certain things Kitty is doing which she would not do actually. She may not do if she was well off or she had a more secure income. So I feel like there are a lot of choices. Even in Lipstick, many of the characters, were like the youngest character, Rihana's choices. If she was going to go and buy anything, she wouldn't need to shoplift. So it's just about like what that economic restraint and economic difficulty does to your choices. And I feel like it's, for me, it's very interesting to sort of explore that. The one, so from Turning 30, I did want to make a conscious shift into a different milieu. And then with Dolly Kitty, also the thing is, I am very familiar with Greater Noida because my mom lives in Noida, and she had this investment in Greater Noida, so we would keep going there. So I'm actually, and I've My grandparents also had like a house there, and also I'm quite familiar with that terrain. So for me it rings very true also what's happening over there, and um all of that. So I think for me a space is important. Like for me, turning 30 more than a Bombay film was a Bandra film. I used to live in Bandra, and it is a very like uh, that kind of a film. So I think for me the space is very very important, and I feel the place, perhaps the place that it's been most important is my last film, Dolly Kitty, because I think it's a story of the city, a city in transition as much as about characters in transition in a certain sense. Like those characters I feel wouldn't exist in another space. And the metaphor of a city in construction is really, it's like those characters who are also works in progress, and they're not fully formed, and they're grappling with their own things. Whereas I think like Bhopal, I treated it more like a binary, tradition versus modernity. So the old city versus the malls, and the characters also had a very clear, you know X versus Y. So it's like what they want versus what patriarchy is telling them is not possible. So in that sense, I feel Lipstick was a very much clearer. I mean, it's a different way of using the city to tell the story. Whereas I feel with the, so I find that interesting, and I feel so I feel like, yeah, my sense of like clothes and costumes and production design do need to reflect that. I feel a little bit, I like to just see how that can be kind of reflected in terms of camera. I feel like for Lipstick we had taken a very clear call that we used wide lenses up close, because I didn't want to beautify the characters at all. um, we didn't really move the camera much at all. It was really like just holding the camera on the characters, um, and letting them just be how they are without. In Dolly Kitty, it was like more fluid. There was more like breathe, and going with. I feel like the characters are more whimsical in Dolly Kitty, so kind of going with that, and then using the reds in um, the call center office and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about it so deeply, but yeah, I know that I get really hyper if things, if like the thing that I want is not exact, and I have some thought in my head of how exactly some things should be. So yeah.
In Dolly Kitty, there's this shot, like there's this way you've shot Kitty talking on the phone. Is that mostly it's from a low angle through that red glass. But when the for the first time, when before right before she pukes, uh, it's like the red glass comes like her face is split into like metaphorically halves. So what was the thought behind that? Because I found that very interesting in the film.
Yeah, the thing was that how to shoot. Like, see, the thing she's always on the phone, and so much of the film is just about her being on the phone. So I think the idea was that how do we make it like mean something. And I knew that I wanted, like, it was called Red Rose, and I had a really wonderful production designer for the film, Tia Tejpal. And we were trying to figure out like what can we do to give that place more meaning. So then we had decided we'll have these red partitions, and then I don't know, those red partitions, and then and then we just kind of, we were like, let the partitions be transparent, so then we can shoot through them. And then I think that's how it kind of worked out. And then a lot also went in the edit in terms of which shots we chose, because like I said, I shoot quite a lot. So I think I also work with a really fantastic editor, Charushi Roy. And so I think like we also chose then at which points to use which kind of close-ups. But of course, that divided thing I really wanted to use at that point, where it's really like sickening, and she's crossing over from one side to the other actually in that scene. That now she's no longer that, she is now in the muck of it all. So it's like, it's no longer like a gray thing. Now she's moving from so I think yeah, so I did, and I think that I'm glad we did that red thing, because I feel like it really added a lot of meaning to to her character. Also, it was very difficult because the thing is that like the whole, literally whole entire scenes are on Bhumi's face. So I did want something that we could do. I mean, of course her performance is, and I think she had a tough job to like perform so much literally just on her face. But I did feel like a visual element will help with those scenes in terms of the feel and communicating the mood. We also did that thing, like, every time she would travel back, we decided that we'll use that colored light in her car. So there was always that blue tone,
Yeah, the
that
neon
weird,
light.
that weird kind of tone. So every time she's going or coming in that car, you see that tone. So those things, of course, I mean, each of those things is like planned.
So, I wanted to talk, since so much has been talked about lipstick already, and I was there in the masterclass in Whistling Woods where when Anjum sir was kind of questioning you about like what did you did this, why did you do that. This one question that I always I never like I think it was what was that need? What was the need that you felt that you had to somehow um, embody the desire or whatever the aspirations of those four characters were into Rosie, and by the end, it kind of metaphorically came together, and it literally comes together in a split screen during that Lely Jan sequence. Uh, Rosie is a very metaphorical statement that you kind of created. What was that creation like? Where did that thing come from?
So, to begin with, it was just that this character, the oldest character, Buaji, is going to be reading MBs, like these Mills and Moon kind of pulpy novels. So it began with it just being that she's reading this thing. And then I was like, okay, no, she's reading, and then, what exactly she's reading. So then there should be like some kind of a story there. And I have a script, I had a script mentor, Urmi Juvekar, because Lipstick went to the NFDC Screenwriters Lab, and she's also been like a really good friend since then. And really, so she actually, this is much after the lab, sometime before, like when I was trying to finish the script, before shoot and all of that. So she told me that, I think like there's a meta story in here, and you need to work more on um, making it like the story. So it was kind of already there, but I think she really clearly, like, she's like, I can see it's there, but she's like, you need to think about it consciously as the meta story and then connect it. But final view, actually I did after the edit. Like, it was done, but I changed a lot of things and how we used it and all of that a lot, uh post the edit. So if it was something that was there right from the beginning, because always when that first thought of the character, I always thought she'll be reading pulpy novels, and it's that thought is going on in her head. But I think, like, from the time I thought about it till the actually like the final edit and all, I think it really became fully what it was. It was there in the script, but I think, yeah, I think with the edit we worked on it even more, like really connecting one to the other and rewriting all the lines and things.
You did that with Dolly Kitty as well. Like, earlier was the four different characters. Here there's two cousins whose story we're following, and it's not very much heavy with plot points and this will happen, and very conflicted. The conflict is much more internal. But uh, in Dolly Kitty, what kind of stands out for me in terms of the narrative towards the end, that whole the climax sequence where Osman is shot, that all of a sudden kind of is it's, I mean, I feel like, if I may ask, is that something that that do you agree that it was something that would not kind of emerge out of that out of a narrative like that very organically?
It's interesting you're asking me that, because a lot of people have asked me this question. And it's very strange, but from the first moment I thought of Dolly and Kitty, it was always going to end like this, because I think that it's no longer possible to live your personal life without what's going on around you encroaching on who you are and how you're living. Like, so for me, which is why I was telling you, I feel like in Dolly Kitty is the most prominence of the city, because now I feel is a time where, like, I think Lipstick is impossible now, like that kind of living where Hindu families and Muslim families are living together in the same structure, and there's no divisive tension. So I think for me, Dolly Kitty was always going to end like that, because it is a study. It's like a study for microcosm where things are building up into some sort of a strange like violence, which feels like, why is it happening? And yet when you see that it is building up. So I feel for me, like maybe, like Osman had to die. And it had to be a confused thing as to whether he's killed. I mean, in my head, he's killed because, like, whatever, that Billah had to kill him, whatever. He had to get shot by um, a force which doesn't want, doesn't want him to kind of live. So for me, it was always, this film never existed without this element of the rise of majoritarianism, um, and how that in a very odd way affects the characters, because it's not direct really, but he had to die for certain things to kind of happen. And also that whole thing, I always felt, is just going to blow up in one's face. I know a lot of people felt that the film, they were like, oh, like suddenly it's become political, but I don't feel, I mean,
It
that
was very political right from the beginning, and it's planted very nicely, like with Billah and everyone.
uh,
It's there. But what didn't kind of add up was that uh, the sudden nature of his death. I mean,
yeah.
like it
I
was
mean, for
almost, it
me,
felt
yeah.
accidental.
Correct. I mean, I guess that's my, shortcoming as a filmmaker, that people are feeling that it's uh, uh, accidental. Like, I feel it's, in retrospect, it was there. That violence, the seed of that violence was constantly there. I feel it maybe in the edit because, I did remove a lot of things that led up to that evening. So
Yeah.
maybe because I did feel that scene maybe came too fast, and people were not fully prepared. But I feel thematically it was all there, because there was that bubbling over of violence in the city in different ways. uh, because I feel today, are a, if you are Usman in Greater Noida today, you are going to get beaten up, and it's not going to be simple. So I think that, for me, the city was eating into the lives of the characters, and I didn't. And for me, the characters always existed in relation to what's going on in the city. Like, if she's taking up this job, even if she's winning over her own moral dilemma, it's like the city is going on telling her, like, it's so confusing, because they are like, rather than, and no one ever says anything to the men who are using, like, these kind of services. It's like, these women are immoral, this thing should be shut down. So I think for me, this entire scenario of Dolly and Kitty could just never exist without the churning that's going on in the, in their neighborhood, in their city, in that sense. So yeah, and Osman always had to die. He never emerged in my head without his death. He was born to die. So yeah.
Yeah. So coming from that, like there's this question that I really didn't want to ask, but of course I have to ask because that's what people want me to ask. That female director wala thing, I hate that thing. But yeah, Zoya ma'am or Tanuja Chandra ma'am for that matter, they've very openly said that okay, it's not any different, like being a woman director who's like Tanuja Chandra ma'am made films like Dushman and Sangharsh that which are very very testosteronic films. And but you've openly said that now that there's a certain sense of responsibility that you feel, that of this feminist narrative, not even a responsibility, that you're like, okay, this is what I tell, this is my way of telling a story. uh, how much of that is something that kind of pushes you artistically towards being much more vulnerable in terms of your own identity as a woman?
A very tough question, but a very interesting question. Um, you know, so I think that maybe I've come when some women have cleared the way. There already was Aparna Sen and Meera Nair. Then there was, Tanuja, there was Sai Paranjpe, there was Tanuja Chandra, Zoya and Rima had already made films by then. But so I don't know, and Farah Khan has, already been there and all. So I really can't say. I do feel everyone's journey is very, very individual and very unique. For me, I don't want to make films for the heck of making films, because I feel it takes too much out of me and too much of me isn't there. So for me, making films has always been a way of expressing something inside of me, that I feel is important to me, or something I feel like uh, passionately about, something I want to explore about characters and all of that. So I feel as a filmmaker, whether you're a man or a woman, I think the best thing that you can do is to just be honest to who you are and follow your passion about the stories that mean something to you, rather than feeling that's very successful, that's very mainstream, that'll get me distribution, that'll get me stars. I'm not made that way. I feel like I need to tell the stories that I feel like, I just have to tell those stories. And maybe like another person might not feel like that those stories are, but they have to be very relevant and important for me. So I think I come from that school, that it's important to, tell the stories. And for whatever reason, I think because I went to an all girls boarding school, I went to an all girls college, I've read a lot of books by women, I come from a family of very strong women. My inclination and my interest really is in more complex female characters, and I think those are stories that I'm more drawn to. And I must say that, you know the thing is that the cinema has been created and shaped by men and the male gaze. There have hardly been any women behind the camera across the world. And even in India, the percentage has been so tiny. So it's just that one feels that I feel I have something to bring to the table when I'm discussing, like talking about women's characters and their lives, because I still feel there's so much that is unexplored. It's what interests me. So I feel I'm okay. I'm quite comfortable and happy with the idea that, I like to tell these stories, and it's really difficult to get these films, made in a way that they function, because we don't have any alternative sources of funding or distribution. So ultimately, you're fighting for that, the resources from the same mainstream that is actually very patriarchal and misogynist, and making very, like, films which really revolve around the male hero. So my way of looking at it is that I have to try and get as whatever, however I can negotiate with that system, and do what I want to do. And that's been my sort of journey. And I'm very uh, I feel like it's important to talk about the fact that cinema has been created by the male gaze. It's not been created by women. So I feel our ways of watching, our ways of creating, our ways of how we are even consuming cinema, we actually, even we're all looking at cinema literally through male eyes. So I think, like, to at least acknowledge that and see what you can do, how you're using the camera, what are the stories you're telling, do women have any agency, are you just randomly showing their body parts in a song for no reason, are you creating songs which are saying she's a tandoori chicken, I need to eat her, then why are you making those like, so where is that coming from? And it can't just go on because that's how it's done. I think it's important to think about what you're writing, what you're making, how you're shooting. So I guess that's who I am. That's, and I'm happy to own that. And I do feel that, when there are many more women making films, I feel the narrative will change. And even I think, like, form will change, not just, the
Yeah.
content, but I feel form will also change. So I think it's, and to each their own. I feel like there are many, women filmmakers who don't want to be, they're like, and I agree. I feel every filmmaker is first a filmmaker. Then, whoever you as a person comes through. If I'm a person who is interested not in questioning the status quo, but in perpetuating it, then I'll make that cinema, and that's fine. That's who I am. So I think it's very, very personal, but I think the numbers are telling in themselves, if it was that easy when Tanuja Chandra was there, then why was there only one Tanuja Chandra?
True.
Why were there not 500 Tanuja Chandras at that time?
True.
So I think the numbers really need to become 50-50. Then we can be like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm very fond of all these filmmakers. Actually, I must say they're all very, very nice. And a lot of them have been very, very encouraging. And
But like, you're committing to such a big thing. Like, like, what if tomorrow you want to make an out and out, an out and out male film?
I'll make it if that's what I feel like making. I mean, I don't have a thing that if I'm drawn to it and I find it interesting, I'll make it. I don't know if the thing is, I'm not sure I'll be that drawn to it, because it's a lot of time and energy, and I don't know whether I want to. And this is something like, you give 2 years of your life to a film, so I'm not sure I want to spend that 2 years propping up a man. I'm really not sure. Unless it's a very interesting character who's on the fringes and has his own vulnerabilities. And, there is something there, which is why I love doing Made in Heaven, because, it's not, I mean, one protagonist is male and one is female. But, we were really not into putting the heterosexual, cisgender, privileged man at the center of the universe. It was about, a critique of patriarchy. It was about exploring what it's like to be in the fringes, on the fringes, even though it seems like you're on the inside. And so I think I really love doing that show. So I feel like it just depends on the character. But yeah, do I want to, am I very obsessed with, I mean, very interested in doing like a big male hero thing? No, because I just feel like, I mean, there's nothing in it for me. It's great. I mean, people can do it and all of that. But can I spend 2 years of my time? No, because in those 2 years, I might give voice to many other female characters that actually need giving voice to, whereas there are enough people,
To do that
keep
thing. Yeah.
propping up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So yeah, they're talking about the gaze, the female gaze, in your films, which is something that's, it's not. And the best thing about your films is that it's not exactly issue-driven films. Whenever we see a very feminist narrative, it becomes a film about some issue, but it's about complexities and how. So I want to flip on that question a little bit. And how does a female gaze approach the male characters? Like, for example, in Lipstick, uh, the character that was played by Sushant Singh was like, I mean, of course, he was an obnoxious guy, but same time in the character of Amit in Dolly Kitty, he's not like an out and out asshole that you'd imagine. And I was expecting that, okay, something will come, something will come, and, and that was amazing. And so how do you see like in terms of, even in terms of the shooting or in terms of the writing, rounding up of those characters, when it's seen from that perspective, what's your approach to them?
See, first of all, because I'm constantly like creating very female kind of universes, the male characters really only emerge through the eyes of the female protagonists. We never really see them individually, whether it's Lipstick or Dolly Kitty, or in fact, even Turning 30. You don't really see those characters without you only experience them as the female protagonist will experience them. So actually, one, I'm not really, and it's a conscious decision because I know who the film is about. I'm not getting into now what exactly is the journey now of whether it's Sushant's character in Lipstick, or it's Amit's character in played by Amir Bashir in Dolly Kitty. So first, that is the first thing, that we'll only see them as the protagonists are seeing them. And I feel like I feel that sometimes, I know some people are like, especially after Lipstick, a lot of people were like, oh, the male characters are very unidimensional and all that. I didn't think so. I felt that they were not unidimensional. It's just that people are not used to seeing men only from the point of view of the women who are in some sort of relationship with them. So therefore, that's all that you are seeing of them, in that sense. So I felt, for instance, even Rahim's character in Lipstick, he has his own issues. He's jobless and all that. He's sitting in the cafe on his own reading. I mean, he has his own problems going on. He might be doing, and he's an awful person, but he has his own like
Yeah.
thing going on. So I felt like that with a lot of the characters. In Dolly Kitty, it somehow emerged. It wasn't conscious, but I felt like, because the fight is not, so in Lipstick, it's very clear that the fight is between women's desires and societal patriarchy, in a certain sense, that doesn't allow them to wear what they want, work if they want, express their sexual desire if they want, marry who they want, etc. So it was represented a lot by these male characters who might seem stock, but actually it was more like they were just in relation to uh, these female protagonists. In Dolly Kitty, in a way, the journey of Dolly and Kitty is much more complex, because they are not fighting the patriarchy of the person in front of them. They are actually fighting the patriarchy in their heads. Can they change? Can they believe that they deserve better? Can they make choices that seem not correct to society? So the battles were all internal. Actually, Dolly's battle is not with Amit. It's the battle with herself. Can she forgive her mother? Can she accept her son? Can she own her own desire? And therefore, can she walk out of a marriage that is not working for her? So her battle is not really with the man. It's a battle with her own mindset. And the same with Kitty. Her battle is not with Pradeep, or in a sense even with her with Amit, with her brother-in-law, who's touchy feely with her. Her battle is, can I own my decisions and all of that? So I feel like therefore the male characters in Dolly Kitty I felt were quite round. I feel Osman is a really beautiful, sweet and loving character, and therefore he can't live because
Yeah.
he's too good
Yeah.
and too sweet. But I think, like, yeah, even Pradeep's character, I mean, he's bored, he has nothing in his life, he works at night in that old age home, and he's just like puck out, and he keeps doing this with different girls. So it's not like I mean, I wouldn't say he's evil, he's just he's just
He's just
not,
a jerk. Yeah.
he's just a jerk, and not like a, he's not true in that sense. The DJ is a very also very interesting character in a certain sense, because he's the brother of a right winger. He's a softie at heart. He's really like trying to, like,
Yeah.
maneuver the situation. So I feel like, and then of course there's Pappu, who's a boy who identifies himself as a girl. And so I feel like the characters, I personally feel maybe the male characters in Dolly Kitty are more varied, and they're more but that basically comes from the central idea that Dolly and Kitty are not fighting the men in their lives. Actually, they are fighting their own, whereas in Lipstick, I think a lot was about fighting the male presence outside.
A very funny thing happened. Like a friend of mine and me, we were watching Dolly Kitty, and in the end, when she says that, uh, आप हम जो जो हमको चाहिए वो तुम दे नहीं सकते हो, and a friend of mine looked at me and was like, climax बोल रही है क्या? I was like, अबे गधे वो नहीं है, वो हर चीज वही नहीं होती है. So yeah, another question, I don't know why I shared that. Yeah, sorry, that friend will kill me. Samya is asking, do you think showing strong female characters has now become a trend, and male filmmakers position them in a patriarchal society as per their convenience slash to cater the trend?
Well, I think if that becomes a trend, it can only be a good thing, because we were just living on cinema, which was just centering on, the male hero. I would say that even if male filmmakers sometimes, you know, they're making films with female protagonists, and they may not be made from a female gaze, and sometimes you feel it's like strange in some ways, it's still better and it's still a step forward. I would rather that, even if it's out of tokenism or it's following a trend, I still think it's better even if more men are making films with women in the lead. I think we're not at a stage where we are like, oh, we only want nuanced portrayals of women. I just think more women protagonists is really important. And I think the next level is like, when there are enough, then you can be like, oh no, we should have more nuanced portrayals. Right now, I feel like, whether it's Dangal or Pink, film like Pink, which is about the woman, but the narrative is taken over by the strong male character. It's still better to have, and they're all lovely films. It's still better to have those films than not have them, because I feel like they also do a huge service in taking the step forward, helping audiences take a step forward and opening up the way also for more women to make films about women. So I think that it is important that more films are made about women in any case, whether men are making them of women, and also that there should be more female filmmakers in any case, whether they are also making films about men or women. Like, it's not just about women making films about women, but uh, I feel like just overall opening up the space for more women in front of the camera and for more women behind the camera.
But
So I totally get the question and I totally understand it, but I think we are at phase one right now. So I think everything is welcome.
but like, don't you think, like, taking from that question, like, uh, say platforms, there's a lot of platforms that claim to be very, very female oriented or lady oriented, and they're making films and all, which are, or shows which claim to be from a female gaze but are clearly just sleaze fests, which, just for subscribers and viewerships. Uh, don't you think that's kind of like a little damaging to the craft of it, or and the, like as you said, that we're not asking for nuanced performance, nuanced portrayals right now, but anything is welcome. But do you think that'll lead to something good?
I can't say, and honestly, I'm not exactly understanding what shows and all you're talking about, because we've always had all kinds of films.
Yeah, we do, but
And the audience needs to reject that kind of stuff also, because I feel like you can't be like those things shouldn't be made and all that. We are a
oh,
country
not
like a
yeah.
weird audience also, to be honest. So this is an audience that really laps up misogyny, and they love like item songs where you have this one girl and it's literally like a rape culture that is encouraged through these songs, and just these men like just kind of literally trying to paw the woman, and you're showing that as a song. And so I feel we are like it's a strange mix of people also. And I don't believe in censorship, so I feel like it can, whatever people want to make, they can make. Audiences should reject it, and of course people who are making should think more about what they're making. People who are green lighting stuff should think more about what's being greenlit. But I don't know actually. May not have watched what really you're talking about, what kind of shows. So I'm not very sure. Of course, I do know that also what happens is there are so many shows on streaming platforms which have a very male skew, very male universes. And I feel like sometimes, the few women characters that they put, you just are like, can they please flesh them out properly? Can they give them more agency and all of that? But that's a continued battle, and one hopes that there are more and more shows and films with more women, and of course with a more nuanced kind of portrayal. But I'm saying until that nuance happens, honestly, it's really good just to have women frontlining stories.
Murari wants you to create something showing the vulnerability of men and how patriarchy has affected men so much.
That's
That's a good idea. That's a
no,
good
no,
idea.
of course.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Um, Taken from what Samya says, because Samya put out a question which was very interesting to me. So, like monopolizing on the feminist narrative, like everything is being monopolized today, and that is a good market tool as well. Like I'm not sure if it's a market tool, but the film Thappad, you've seen Thappad, right?
Yeah.
It was inherently a marriage story. Like I mean, of course, but that the entire the way it was anchored around, uh, it made a gender issue out of it. but but it was subliminally there, but that was again with a film like Marriage Story as well. But of course, that's America. That's the narrative is much more further ahead there. Here it's just being talked about here. So that monopolizing of an issue, what like do you kind of subscribe to that notion that if there is do you think it's like it's cool to do that?
I don't agree with your example of Thappad. I didn't feel that there was anything that they were monopolizing,
But
etc.
not sorry, but like I put it
Yeah,
wrong, but
no,
yeah.
no, I know what you're saying. But I'll again go back to my earlier statement that, there are two things. One is what a film is, and then how what marketing people decide to do to push it. That's a totally different thing. What the marketing department decide of any film, of any studio, of any platform decides how they decide to push it. I really feel that's a totally different conversation. But as long as the film is saying something, it has a story, uh, even if it gives you 2.5 thoughts to think about, I think it's worth it, because we are coming from a cinema that has that says Ranjana is a great film, whereas Ranjana, from my point of view, is a film that completely glorifies stalking. So we are coming from like Chikni Chameli.
Yeah.
We are coming from a culture where in the 1970s, um, rape scenes were inserted into films literally like every to give thrills to the audience, and no rape survivor in any film ever survived. Like anyone who was raped in a film, any woman, she either was killed or she committed suicide. There was never a live show. So we are coming from a very strange kind of misogynistic, toxic culture. So I feel therefore that as long as like there is this an intent to tell some story about what a woman is feeling, putting her uh, uh, in the role of the protagonist, I think it's a breath of fresh air compared, like if you just see it in context of where we are coming from. Of course, there's always like space for improvement and growth, but I feel we haven't reached that point yet. First, we need to stop like this, like we need to have an audience that is not patronizing this kind of misogynist cinema. So I just feel like where we are coming from, it's great to talk, like do discuss all the nuances, and we should. But I honestly am less. I feel like we need to, the moment you pull out, you realize that um, it's okay if like a person has made a film about a woman and the marketing department is selling it as a uh, whatever female empowerment film or whatever. I don't have any problem with that, but at least those films are being made, those female actors are getting those parts, at least you're seeing a woman leading a film, which I feel is so important, because right now, we see 3 4 films, we think there are many films, but still there are those few films only. Every year the number might go up by 4 5, but thousands of films are made, you know
So finally, let's wrap up with one advice that you would give to aspiring young writers and young filmmakers like myself.
Okay. I would just say that don't doubt your talent or your uniqueness. I think everyone has a story to tell, and everyone can, if you're here in this field, you're working at it, of course, I think everyone has talent, everyone has capability. I think the real test is whether you have the emotional resilience to stay in the game. So it's like, I really feel the only difference is between people who get disheartened and give up and those who are doggedly at it. So I would only say that the only real piece of advice I can give is don't give up and just continue. Things will work out. Sometimes it just takes longer. This is the thing about this field. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's faster, sometimes something happens, and then after that, there's a dead phase. So it is uncertain, but I feel like it's just about not giving up and staying. I feel it's like sometimes you feel like, Arey, nothing is, it's just about letting yourself that, okay, one more day, I'm going to do this. So I feel those who have the resilience, I feel one needs emotional strength um, and resilience. I feel if that is there and a no, like a not giving up attitude, I think everything is possible. It's just like, don't leave, don't give up. It's just stick it out. I feel things always happen, and I feel to continue to believe in your own voice and your own, because I feel like storytelling is, there's no set thing, it's good or bad, it's so unique, so I feel like treasure your own uniqueness and your own voice. So don't doubt that. I feel like the only thing is keep working on your craft, keep working on your skills, and just keep at it. That's all. I don't have anything else to say, but I
Thank
think
you.
this is the most important thing.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you to join in. And it was a great session. Thank you so much. Someday perhaps we'll meet in 3D and we'll talk about Dehradun more. Thank you so much.
Yes, let's do that. All the best. Thank you so much. Please
Thank
take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.